July 28, 1964, 3:17 p.m., Oakland, California. A narrow second-floor room at 1125 Broadway, where dust gathered along the windowsills and the summer heat pressed gently against the glass. The air inside the small kung fu school was thick with the scent of polished wood and perspiration absorbed into canvas mats. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds in pale stripes, illuminating suspended particles that drifted without urgency. Outside, traffic murmured along Broadway. The muted growl of engines rose and fell like a distant tide. Inside, there was discipline, stillness, anticipation, without knowing its reason. 16 students stood along the perimeter wall, backs straight, eyes forward. Some were college athletes from nearby Berkeley. Others were factory workers who came in worn boots and left barefoot. All watched the clock without appearing to. The second hand advanced with quiet precision. At the center of the room stood Bruce Lee. He weighed 140 pounds. His frame appeared slight beneath the plain white t-shirt and black training trousers. Yet nothing in his posture suggested fragility. His spine was aligned as if suspended from above. His shoulders rested without tension. His breathing was barely perceptible. He moved through a sequence alone, measured footwork across the wooden floor, a pivot that seemed almost too small to notice, a strike that cut the air with a contained snap. No wasted motion, no theatrical flourish, only efficiency. The door at the top of the staircase opened without knocking. The hinges announced the interruption with a low metallic complaint. Conversation died instantly. Even the traffic outside seemed to recede. A man filled the doorway. He was well over 6 feet tall, broad through the chest and shoulders, wearing a dark jacket that strained across his frame. His hands were large, knuckles thick, the hands of someone accustomed to collision. He stepped forward once, and the floor beneath him answered with a heavier tone than before. His name was known among local martial circles, a northern stylist, a man who believed in rooted stances and crushing power. His students spoke of broken boards and bruised ribs. He did not bow when he entered. His gaze moved past the students and settled on the smallest man in the room. "That's him," he said, not loudly, but with enough contempt to carry. No one responded. Bruce Lee turned fully toward the doorway. His expression did not change, and his eyes did not narrow. He simply regarded the man as one might regard an unexpected shift in weather. The challenger stepped closer, boots striking wood in deliberate rhythm. "I've heard," he continued, "that you claim your way is superior, that you teach without tradition, that you say size does not matter." A faint smile touched Bruce's mouth, not of amusement, but recognition. "I teach what works," Bruce replied. The challenger removed his jacket slowly, folding it over his forearm as if preparing for a formal demonstration. His forearms were thick, veins visible beneath the skin. He outweighed Bruce by at least 50 pounds, perhaps more. "You are too small to speak of power," the man said. "Strength is not theory." The room tightened, shoulders stiffened along the wall. Someone swallowed audibly. The afternoon light seemed sharper now, exposing tension in every face. Bruce stepped forward until only a few feet separated them. He did not raise his voice. "Power," he said evenly, "is not weight. It is direction." A pause followed, thin, delicate, dangerous. The challenger gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Then show me." Silence deepened. 16 witnesses stood frozen, forming a quiet ring around inevitability. There were no cameras, no reporters. Only wood floor, filtered sunlight, and breath. Bruce glanced once at his students, not for approval, but to steady the atmosphere. "You are certain?" he asked the man. The challenger lifted his chin. "Very." A stillness fell so complete that the ticking clock on the far wall sounded almost intrusive. 3:22 p.m. Bruce removed his own shirt calmly and placed it over a chair. His torso was lean, muscles defined, but not exaggerated. Nothing about him suggested brute force. Everything about him suggested readiness. He stepped into position, not a deep stance, not rooted in tradition, but narrow, mobile, alive. The challenger widened his base dramatically, feet planted with authority. His fists tightened, his jaw set. Outside, a truck backfired on Broadway. The sharp echo drifted up the stairwell like a starting pistol. The larger man moved first. He lunged with a heavy forward step, right arm sweeping outward in a forceful strike meant to overwhelm by sheer mass. What followed lasted less than 3 seconds. Bruce shifted half a step to the side, no more than 6 inches. His lead hand intercepted the incoming arm with a compact deflection, redirecting force rather than meeting it. In the same breath, his rear fist shot forward in a straight line so direct it seemed almost invisible. The sound was not explosive. It was concise, a sharp impact at the sternum. The challenger's momentum halted mid-motion. Before his body could recover, Bruce's foot slid forward and another strike landed, precise and controlled, targeting balance rather than destruction. A final movement, subtle, economical, sent the larger man backward. He stumbled, not violently, but unmistakably. His heel caught the edge of the mat. He fell against the wall, air forced from his lungs in a startled exhale. The clock continued ticking. Bruce did not pursue. He did not advance. He returned to neutral stance, hands lowered, utter breathing unchanged. The challenger remained against the wall, eyes wide, not from pain alone, but from recalibration. The room did not erupt in cheers. It did not need to. 16 students stood in complete silence. One of them later counted the exchange. 2 seconds, perhaps 3. No flurry, no spectacle, only interruption. The larger man straightened slowly. His chest rose and fell as he tested his breath. The arrogance that had entered with him did not return to his face. He looked at Bruce, not with hostility now, but with inquiry. "You didn't use full strength," he said quietly. Bruce shook his head once. "I used enough." Another silence, thicker than the first. The challenger glanced around the room, aware of every witness. The afternoon light no longer felt warm. It felt revealing. "Oh, teach me," he said. No sarcasm, no challenge, a simple request. Bruce studied him for a moment, not measuring but intention. "Leave your ego outside next time," Bruce replied. "Then we begin." The larger man nodded. He picked up his jacket without haste. Before exiting, he bowed, awkwardly but sincerely. The door closed with less noise than it had made upon opening. The students exhaled almost collectively. Some would later say they felt the air change in the room as though something invisible had shifted permanently. Bruce put his shirt back on. He did not smile. He did not address what had happened. "Again," he said softly, stepping back into position. Training resumed. Years later, there would be debates, questions about details, variations in retelling. No recording would exist. Only those 16 witnesses and the memory of a heavy man stopped by a lighter one who refused to meet force with force. In Oakland, among small circles of practitioners, the story traveled quietly, across dojos, through late-night conversations, whispered in locker rooms, and recounted between sparring rounds. It was never described as a fight. It was described as a correction, and those who heard it understood something without needing instruction. Strength without direction is weight. Power without control is noise. On that summer afternoon in 1964, inside a narrow room above Broadway, a giant discovered that mass is not mastery, and the smallest man in the room never raised his voice. July 28, 1964. 3:22 p.m. Oakland. The air had changed. What moments earlier had been a warm training hall now felt compressed, as though the walls themselves had drawn inward to witness what pride had summoned. The blinds trembled slightly from a passing truck below. Dust hung suspended, undecided. The challenger rolled his shoulders once, twice, as if preparing for a contest he had rehearsed in his mind many times before. His breathing deepened. His fists tightened. The floor answered each subtle shift of his weight with a low wooden murmur. Across from him, Bruce Lee stood almost casually. No dramatic guard, no theatrical readiness. His hands hovered in front of him, relaxed yet alert, fingers alive. His stance was narrow, mobile, like a coiled line rather than a rooted tree. 16 witnesses remained along the perimeter wall. One of them would later say he could hear his own pulse in his ears. Another would remember the exact angle of the sunlight on the floorboards. None of them moved. The larger man spoke first. "You talk about efficiency," he said, voice steady but edged, "but strength is what ends a fight." Bruce regarded him without tension. "Efficiency ends it sooner," he replied. A pause followed, not empty but charged. The challenger advanced a step. "You rely on speed, that fades." Bruce's gaze did not waver. "I rely on timing." Outside, a car horn sounded, distant and irrelevant. The larger man lunged. It was not clumsy. It was not wild. It was powerful. His right arm drove forward with the intent to overwhelm, his mass behind it, his shoulder rotating with committed force. The air split around the motion. Bruce did not retreat. He shifted, 6 inches to the left, not backward. Not away, just enough. His forearm intercepted the incoming strike at an angle, not blocking but redirecting. The challenger's force slid past its intended line, guided off course with minimal resistance. In the same breath, Bruce's rear fist traveled forward, straight, economical, unadorned. The impact landed at the center of the chest. It was not loud. It was precise. The challenger's momentum faltered mid-step. His eyes flickered, not in pain alone, but in surprise at the interruption of certainty. Before the larger man could re-establish balance, Bruce stepped in once, foot gliding across the wood with quiet intent. A second strike followed, shorter, controlled, directed not to injure, but to disrupt structure. The challenger's center lifted slightly, his footing compromised. Then came the final adjustment. A subtle shift of Bruce's hips, a measured push at the exact angle of imbalance. The larger man moved backward against his will. His heel grazed the mat's edge. His body tilted. He collided with the wall behind him, not violently, but undeniably. The air left his lungs in a sharp exhale that echoed in the sudden stillness. 2 seconds, perhaps 3. The clock on the far wall continued its steady progression, 3:22 and some seconds beyond. Bruce did not advance. He did not press the advantage. He lowered his hands and stepped back to neutral distance, breathing unchanged, expression undisturbed. The challenger remained against the wall, chest rising as he tested his breath. His eyes, once dismissive, now searched for explanation. He had felt the force. It had not been brute. It had not been heavy. Yet it had been decisive. Silence wrapped the room. No applause, no whispered commentary, only the shared recognition that something irreversible had occurred. The larger man pushed himself upright. His shoulders, once squared in dominance, settled into something quieter. "You stopped me," he said, almost to himself. Bruce inclined his head slightly. "You stopped yourself." The challenger looked down at his own hands, flexing them slowly. There was no visible damage, no dramatic injury, only a recalibration of belief. "You didn't meet my strength," the man said. "I didn't need to," Bruce answered. Another long pause. The students along the wall stood motionless, aware that they were witnessing more than a physical exchange. They had seen speed before. They had seen sparring. What they had not seen was force dissolved without collision. The larger man's voice lowered. "Teach me." It was not spoken for the room. It was spoken across the narrow space between them. Bruce studied him for a moment, measuring not size but sincerity. "Leave your pride outside," he said quietly. "Return without it." The challenger nodded. He bent slightly at the waist, an imperfect bow, hesitant but genuine. When he turned toward the staircase, His steps were slower than when he had arrived. The door closed with a softer sound. The room exhaled. One student glanced at the clock and memorized the time. Another would later recount that he had never before seen strength redirected so cleanly. Years afterward, their descriptions would differ in detail, but never in outcome. Bruce put his shirt back on. He did not address what had happened. He did not lecture. He did not claim superiority. He stepped back to the center of the floor. "Again," he said. Training resumed as though interruption had been part of the lesson. Outside, Oakland continued its afternoon without awareness. Traffic moved. Shopkeepers spoke with customers. The sun drifted lower. Inside that second-floor room, however, something had shifted permanently. The story traveled first in whispers, through small gyms, across Chinatown tea houses, into conversations between practitioners who spoke in lowered voices. No newspaper recorded it. No film preserved it. Its authority rested solely in the consistency of its witnesses. They would describe the same image, a large man advancing with certainty and a smaller man dissolving that certainty in seconds. They would not call it a fight. They would call it clarity. In time, the incident became part of a quiet legend, not exaggerated, not adorned with spectacle, simply remembered. Those who heard it understood without instruction. Mass alone does not command outcome. Noise does not equal power, and confidence without control collapses at the first redirection. On that summer afternoon in Oakland, 140 pounds stood unmoved before a giant's certainty. The lesson was not shouted, it was demonstrated, and it required only seconds to endure for decades.